want to start quickly with two things, and I'm not sure the clarity of the quote that's on the screen from Matt from Twitter, but it's about the fact that as Americans, as consumers, we're bombarded daily with content. And that really is. I mean, we're all consumers, we're researchers, we're marketers, and it really is a trickle-down effect. You know, our job as researchers is to help those teams that we support, you know, take to market the strongest message, the best proposition, the best product, and really break through. And it's really important that we break through not to just everybody in particular, but our specific target audience. And how do we do that? Whoops, let me go back. The other thing that I want to start off with is just a quick question, so a little bit audience participation. So what was the first thing you did this morning when you woke up, or perhaps the last thing you did last night before going to sleep? I'm looking for one answer, one correct answer. If anybody's brave enough to shout this out, I'll give you some 1Q credits at the end.
Grab your phone.
Checked your phone. Oh my gosh. How many credits am I going to have to get out? Absolutely. You checked your phone. I think I gave you a little sneak peek. You know, perhaps you use it as an alarm clock and you simply woke up this morning, but before rolling over and kissing your loved one good morning, good night, you probably scrolled through some social media to check in on what your friends or colleagues were doing. You answered a few emails, you planned your calendar, you paid a bill, you get the picture, which kind of makes this next slide, you know, really relevant. There's over 7 billion people on Earth, with 5.1 billion owning a mobile phone and only 4.2 billion owning a toothbrush. Charlie, some room for you guys to find some growth in that category. I guess those people really didn't get the text message. And I want to give slide credits to Bonin Bao. 1Q is part of Bonin's portfolio. And if you've ever heard Bonin speak, he talks about how the internet was like a wave. It changed really how we all have done business, how technology has evolved. And if the internet was a wave, perhaps the mobile adaptation is like a tsunami. You know, we now can do everything in our lives, both business and personal, through our mobile phone. And that comes clearly in this next slide, where we see 96% of millennials own a mobile phone, and thank goodness they're getting the memo on dental and oral hygiene, because 93% now own a toothbrush. And a tsunami is right. As I mentioned earlier, we can manage every aspect of our lives through our mobile device. We can order groceries online, no problem, you know, pay the bill. If you and I had gone to lunch today, we could have split it through Venmo or another app. And what I'm kind of telling you right now is nothing new. I think as consumers, we all get this. However, there's still some sort of conflict within the industry with regards to what, you know, we'll label that online, more traditional research approach, and then the mobile research. And yes, while online traditional researchers, you know, they have added the mobile capability into their portfolio, there's still a lot of conflict of those that are simply relying on mobile research with regards to connecting with consumers. And the argument from the traditional approach goes something like, you know, data quality, you know, is it statistical? I think you should only use that as directional. Or respondents, how are you validating your members? You know, how do you know that Bob is Bob and he's 61 and he lives where he lives? Or time, respondent fatigue. You know, there's always that conversation of how long is too long with regards to surveys. You know, can, you know, somebody really take a really robust survey on their mobile device? And my response is nobody really wants to take a real long, robust survey, regardless of the type of device that they're answering that on. And so there's that kind of push-pull, because I know as researchers, you guys have all been tasked with, you know, going to market stronger, faster, better, cheaper, and you're looking at different technologies kind of in that emergent space, and there's all this clutter flooding about. So I just wanted to kind of talk about a few of those the concerns that are constantly brought up. And rightfully so. There is some validation to what the traditional researcher says. You know, when they're talking about an app-only system, they do have a point. You know, not everybody who owns a mobile phone actually owns a smartphone. And not everybody who owns a smartphone downloads and or keeps an app. So can you reach that general population, that national census? and or crowdsourcing. They're saying, how are you validating that person? Or is that person simply just trying to answer questions really quickly because they want to get to that content, that article that they want to read on people.com or Wall Street Journal? So really, or is there concern with regards to straight lining? And in some cases, yes. So I really encourage you to do your homework and really vet out the process. Another thing that we hear kind of in this emergent technology space is buzzwords, DIY, do it yourself, instant responses, real time. And it kind of takes me back to a conversation I was having with somebody recently. A girlfriend of mine in the industry, she is on your side of the fence, and she said, Julie, I found this great new supplier. I can go in and enter all the content and all the questions myself. And then I hit submit, and I send it off for approval. And then about 48 hours later, I get all of, my content back, and some of my questions have been struck through. But that's okay. I got, most of the questions I want to ask. And I sat there and thought, wow, is that really do it yourself? If you're having to send it off for approval and they're providing feedback, and it took 48 hours. And then she continued, and I continued to listen because I'm a good friend. I'm Southern that way. We will listen. And she continued to say, and then they sent me a link, and I got to watch my results come in real time. And I thought, well, that's fantastic, but now it's been 72 hours since you started the process. So how is that really do it yourself? How is that really real time? How is that instant? And so there's a lot of buzzwords out there. So I really do encourage you to do your homework and vet out the system. Similar to what Procter & Gamble did with 1Q, it was really important that they spent time vetting out our capabilities. From a technology point of view, the fact that we can reach any one of our respondents, we call them 1Q members, regardless of their mobile device. We had that dual-based system. That's hugely valuable because we can go out to Gen Pop, that national census, if that's what your project entails. If you want to narrow in those demographics, you have the ability to do that as well. It was really important that they understood our validation process with regards to our member base. Our members is an opted-in system, and the validation metrics that we have in place are rock solid, so that's super important to our customers. And what's even more important, and specifically I think the reason why Procter & Gamble has formed such a great relationship with us, is the ability for that two-way conversation, to be able to continuously follow up with our members based off of how they responded over and over if that's what they choose. 2 days from now, 2 weeks from now, 2 months from now, so they can apply that iterative learning throughout their stage gate process. So how does it work? I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of foundation about how 1Q works, and then I'm going to talk about 2 case studies. So really quickly, Procter & Gamble and our other customers are able to go into our dashboard, create their content, their survey questions and various types. From that, they're able to narrow down their demographics. So do they want to target females only, age 18-34, that live in 3 cities? They can do that. So they have the ability to go broad or really be very specific. Once they hit send, they're able to reach out to our members and get the responses in real time. And based off of how those responses start to come in, then our customers are able to then continue to have that dialogue and take the conversation and the research accordingly based off of what they're seeing. So again, applying more of that iterative learning. So the first case study that I want to cover is male teenagers. And this one is near and dear to my heart and probably my favorite case study because I have a 14-year-old son and I am living the teenage world. And let me tell you, it's fun if you have not reached that stage with any of your kids. So what do we know about teenage boys? For the first time, they are on their own with regards to their personal hygiene. They're showering, they're using deodorant, they're clipping their toenails, or at least we're hoping they're doing all this. And then what do we know? As parents, we're still the ones primarily buying all the product. However, all of a sudden the conversations have gotten really awkward. Teenage boys are no longer coming home and telling you about their school day. In fact, our conversation in the car goes something like this. Hey, honey, how was your day at school? Fine. All right, that was a really nice conversation. So you can imagine the lack of dialogue we are having about, perhaps some funky stuff growing on his toes. He has no idea it's athlete's foot, but he's also not coming to tell me what it is. So the P&G team had this thought process: is there a potential go-to-market campaign where we can bridge the gap with regards to conversations not happening? Are there certain topics that we can then help open up that dialogue and make it easier? So the first question went something like this, and wow, can you guys even read that? No? Okay, I'll read it for you. It says something like this: are there any issues of particular concern that are bothering you right now? And they went out to boys aged 13 to 18, and you can see the responses coming in real time, and then, athlete's foot, dry, itchy scalp, facial hair, acne, and things of that nature. And from this, the P&G team was able to then continue to have a dialogue with and follow up and dive in deeper with regards to some follow-up questions. So some of the next questions went something like: sometimes you want advice on personal issues that matter to you, but you find it difficult, awkward, or embarrassing to discuss with your parents. Please share one or more of those experiences with us. And the information the P&G team got back in return was valuable. I mean, paragraphs about bullying and sex and depression, self-harm, religious beliefs. We have one person here, I don't think you can read it, where he's questioning if he's transgender. So a lot of powerful content. And then after diving into those results, the P&G team started to find trends of conversations and topics. And from that, they were able to continue to follow up with sex and relationship and depression in different paths. So they made that content, those questions, really relevant. So they were able to really narrow down their focus in their topic of conversation. And so what we know of just about this case study in general is it's very hard, very time-consuming, and very expensive to reach teenage boys. The amount of time that would have taken in more of that traditional environment and would have been very timely and costly. We also hypothesize that perhaps that teenage boy that was struggling with his sexuality, or the fact that, perhaps they're smoking or doing self-harm or something like that, would not have come through clearly with regards to a traditional moderator. And the reason why we feel that, the responses within our member base are more in-depth, they're more engaging, is because we value our consumer, our member. We come at any type of engagement with anybody in our panel with regards to empowerment. So we feel like if we're going to reach out to anybody within our group for 5 seconds or 5 minutes of their time, they should get paid instantly to their PayPal account. So every time that we reach out and say, hey, can you answer a few questions for us? Hey, do you mind watching a video? We want to make sure that they're valued. So again, we feel like this whole process, and the reason why we were able to get such in-depth information, was because of that. The second case study that I'm going to show is new product development. And no, I'm not sharing any specific trade secrets. I know Charlie's like, oh gosh, what's she going to talk about? But what I wanted to talk about was more the process and how P&G has been able to apply more iterative learning by using 1Q throughout that more traditional stage gate process. Because you have the ability to constantly follow up at any point, Procter & Gamble has been able to take a set of consumers, that they have been able to identify in their segmentation work, and start with that white space exploration, that fuzzy front end, the jobs to be done, circumstance of struggle, and then continue to learn from them along the way. So we heard you here. We've created some ideas. What do you think now? Take those results, apply it to concept testing, reach back out and touch those same consumers on the shoulder and discuss concepts and product development all the way through execution. 1Q, we are a little bit different. There's that imaginary line in the sand with regards to who you research to and then who you then go and your marketing teams market to. With 1Q, it's up to you on how you want to engage with our panel and our member group. So Procter & Gamble has been able to take the same group of consumers all the way through post-execution, and then, by the way, touch them on the shoulder one last time and says, hey, here's a promo code. Go try the product, and can you continue to provide feedback for us? And the thought process is it's so hard given the new consumer and then the consumers to come to really gain that brand loyal consumer. So perhaps by having them engaged in the process along the way, do you have a potential marketer or a champion by the time you launch your brand? So somebody out there in the world that's really already supporting you. The thought process is, hey, I helped create the baby. Now I'm very proud of what I was able to be a part of. And don't get me wrong, Procter & Gamble is still running that parallel, consumer group, a new consumer group each time, just as that traditional check and balance. So just to kind of let you know that. Since you really can't see the content, perhaps what I'm about to show doesn't really matter, but I just threw up some examples of where they were starting with that more fuzzy front end around bladder leaks, around back pain. What was really interesting to me with regards to this specific one is the fact that they were at the product development prototype. And because we have the geofencing capabilities, they only wanted to speak with consumers that fit that 5 to 10 mile radius from their facility. So again, we've created some prototypes. Are you willing to come in and provide additional feedback? It's up to our members on whether they want to pass along their PI or not. Typically, we see a really good adoption rate the more specific you are. But again, to be able to carry them all the way through that journey has been hugely valuable for P&G and other like customers. So that's all I have. If we have time for questions, okay.